"Hey, Blackie, go serve drinks." The words didn't float. They struck. Sharp, public, calculated to humiliate. Laughter followed too quick, too loud. The kind of laughter that tries to make cruelty sound like a joke. It was the winter gala at the Ashford estate. Crystal chandeliers hung heavy above. Strings filled the hall with quiet elegance. White gloves clinked champagne flutes. And in the middle of that choreographed civility, one finger pointed like a spear. A woman in a scarlet gown leaned forward, eyes gleaming, her pearl necklace swaying as she barked the insult at the only black woman in sight. The crowd around her, men in tailored tuxedos, women in navy and emerald satin, burst into smirks and chuckles. One man tilted his glass as if saluting the cruelty. Another whispered, "She must be catering staff." Their voices carried, because they wanted them to. But the target didn't flinch. She stood in a white dress that didn't sparkle, didn't shout, no necklace, no gaudy diamonds, just clean lines and calm presence. In her hand, a slim phone pressed against her ear. Her posture was still, deliberate, as if the insult had landed on marble, not flesh. The caller on the other end spoke softly. She responded evenly, words crisp, businesslike. "Yes, Carla. Confirm the terms, but hold signature until I say go." Around her, the sneers grew. "She's ignoring us," the woman in red laughed. "Even the help gets attitudes now." A gray-haired man leaned in, voice dripping mockery. "Careful, she might charge us for overtime." The group roared again, delighted with themselves. One waiter paused nearby, his tray trembling just slightly. A young woman near the coat room bit her lip, her phone angled discreetly. Witnesses were waking up, but the circle of mockers stayed loud, armored by wealth and arrogance. The black woman lowered her phone. Her eyes shifted slowly, scanning the semicircle of faces pointed at her. She didn't speak. Not yet. Her silence was heavier than their laughter, pressing against the room like a storm cloud nobody wanted to name. And in that silence, a flicker of memory surfaced her at 19. Told by a hotel clerk she was in the wrong lobby. Her at 28, denied a seat at a table she financed. Same tone. Zama cruelty. Different chandeliers. Zama poison. But this time, there was no clerk, no borrowed chair. This time, the room belonged to her. The woman in red, emboldened, stepped closer and tilted her glass. A drop of wine slipped onto the parquet floor, deliberate. "Oops," she smirked. "Clean that up, would you?" The crowd chuckled again. A man clapped his hand over his mouth, as though he couldn't contain his amusement. Another whispered, "She should be grateful she's even in here." The black woman didn't move. Her voice came low, nearly a whisper, but it cut sharper than their laughter. "Carla, prepare Protocol 7. No one around her understood the phrase. But on the other end of the line, her assistant froze for just a breath, then answered, steady, "Confirmed, ma'am, standing by." And in that single exchange, calm, cryptic, decisive, the balance in the room shifted. None of the mockers realized it yet. They thought they'd humiliated a stranger. What they had done was awaken the woman who held their future in the palm of her hand. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Ava Thompson. Ava Thompson didn't look like the billion-dollar deal-maker who could bend boardrooms with a single phone call. That was intentional. She had chosen simplicity tonight. A white gown with clean lines, no shimmering stones, no designer logo dangling from her wrist. Her hair swept back in a low bun that didn't scream prestige, only discipline. To the crowd in sequins and platinum watches, she blended in as just another guest easily mistaken, easily dismissed. And that was the point, because Ava had walked into this gala with her mind already sharpened. This wasn't just a party. It was the prelude to a merger that would shift markets, a partnership worth $1 billion. The family now mocking her was supposed to be her counterpart. They had come expecting dominance. She had come expecting a test. Ava had no entourage, no photographers trailing behind her, no personal assistant hovering with a clipboard. She carried only her phone and the quiet confidence of a woman who had built empires from rejection. Every step across the marble floor was measured, as if she'd already weighed the cost of being underestimated. The mockers didn't know her history. They didn't know that at 25, she'd been mistaken for an intern at a negotiation table she personally funded. They didn't know that at 31, A banker asked for her real employer before approving her investment portfolio. They didn't know she'd been told more than once that she didn't fit the image of a CEO. And tonight, she let them repeat the same mistake. As the insult echoed, Ava didn't correct them. She didn't flash her credentials. She didn't announce her power. Instead, she held her silence like a blade still sheathed, waiting for the right strike. Across the ballroom, a junior caterer paused mid-step, tray wobbling in his grip. His eyes darted to Ava, then to the laughing circle of billionaires, then back again. He knew something was off. He wasn't alone. A young guest near the piano leaned toward her friend and whispered, "That's not staff. Look at the way she's standing." The friend shrugged, uncertain, but pulled out her phone anyway. The arrogance of the family blinded them. They saw only a woman in white who didn't match their narrow frame of belonging. They couldn't see the storm tightening behind her calm eyes. Ava's phone call continued, steady, detached. "Yes, Carla. Put the documents on hold. No signatures until further notice." Her tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. It was the kind of composure that unsettled people used to obedience. The laughter rang on, but it was cracking. A few nearby guests shifted uncomfortably, glancing between the circle of mockers and the woman they targeted. Something in Ava's stillness demanded attention. It was the stillness of someone who had been here before, many times, and never once broken. This was not weakness, it was calculation. Because while the family thought they were entertaining themselves with cruelty, Ava was already writing their ending one clause, one phone call, $1 billion contract at a time. The circle closed tighter. A silver-haired man in a double-breasted tuxedo stepped forward, his smile dripping with false charm. "Miss, are you lost? Staff should really stay behind the curtains." His voice carried, designed for the room to hear. A ripple of laughter followed, not because the joke was clever, but because cruelty had already set the tone. Another voice chimed in, a younger man, no older than 30, with champagne fizz still clinging to the corner of his lip. Or maybe she snuck in. Security's getting sloppy these days. He tilted his glass toward Ava like a toast, then turned his back before she could answer. A woman in emerald satin fanned herself dramatically. "I'll give her credit, though. The dress is clean. Could have fooled me for a guest." Her words sliced low, almost casual, but the smirk on her lips burned with intention. Ava didn't move. Her phone slipped back into her clutch. Her eyes traced each face in the semicircle, not with fear, not even with anger, but with the cool patience of someone collecting evidence. The laughter pushed harder. "Are you sure you're not part of the waitstaff?" One man pressed, waving an empty glass in her direction. He held it there, suspended, as though daring her to take it. When she didn't, he set it on the nearest table with a huff, muttering, "Useless." Behind them, a piano note faltered. The musician's hands hesitated on the keys, his eyes flicking toward the unfolding theater. Guests across the ballroom were turning their heads now, curiosity tugging against the weight of social etiquette. A young woman near the coatroom lifted her phone higher, her finger trembling over the record button. She whispered to her friend, "This is bad. This feels wrong." Her friend shook his head, murmuring, "Don't get involved." But her lens was already open, capturing the glint of malice bouncing off crystal chandeliers. One of the family's sons leaned in close, his cologne sharp, his grin wider than it should have been. "You're standing in the wrong circle," he hissed, voice dipped with menace. "This is a private event, for people who belong." The woman in red raised her glass again, the same one that had dripped wine at Ava's feet. She swirled it slowly, her laughter breaking the fragile quiet. "I still think she should be serving. Look at her, so quiet, so still. Doesn't even defend herself." The arrogance thickened, pressing like smoke. It wasn't just about her presence anymore, it was about erasing it, about forcing the room to agree she was less. But Ava's silence was deliberate. Because while they pressed, mocked, and laughed, she stood like an anchor in the storm, immovable, unshaken. And though they thought they had cornered her, they had no idea every word they spoke, every gesture they made, was being weighed against them in real time. The storm wasn't hers, it was theirs. And soon it would break. The taunts hung in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Glasses clinked, laughter rolled. But in the center of the circle, Ava Thompson did not move. She could have snapped back. She could have corrected them with one sentence, one title, one fact. But that would have given their cruelty too much credit. Instead, she chose stillness. Her gaze locked forward, not confrontational, not submissive, simply present, as if she were allowing them to perform their ugliness on a stage they didn't realize she owned. One man, frustrated by her calm, barked, "What? Nothing to say?" Typical. They never do when called out. He expected a reaction, a tremor, a flinch. Ava offered none. Her silence unsettled him more than any argument could. She shifted slightly, just enough to retrieve her phone again. Her voice stayed low, steady, surgical. "Carla, confirm terms, frozen. Delay execution until my next call." Her assistant's reply came crisp through the line, "Logged, ma'am. Standing by." Ava ended the call with one tap. The family didn't understand the language of power. They thought they were watching a woman falter. What they were actually watching was the beginning of their undoing. The woman in emerald scoffed. "She's pretending not to hear us. How pathetic." She leaned toward her husband, whispering loud enough for Ava to catch. "I hate when they get uppity. Better to ignore them." But Ava wasn't ignoring. She was documenting every word etched into memory, every sneer stored like evidence. Her mind flickered, not to anger, but to history. She remembered being 22, standing in line at a luxury boutique. The cashier had skipped her twice, serving 2 white women behind her before acknowledging her at all. She had walked out that day without a purchase, but with a resolve. Never again would she beg for entry into spaces she could one day buy outright. And here she was again. Different chandeliers, different faces, same disease. The red-dressed matriarch clicked her tongue, circling Ava like a hawk sizing up prey. "You stand there like you own the place, but we know better, don't we?" Ava's lips curved slightly, not a smile, not mockery, but something sharper. She didn't answer. Her silence was not emptiness, it was weight, and the weight began pressing on the others even as they laughed. Across the hall, a guest near the bar whispered, "She hasn't said a word, and yet, look at them. They look desperate." Another nodded, eyes narrowing, desperate to prove she doesn't belong. The family didn't hear it. They were too wrapped in their performance. But the room was shifting, molecule by molecule, in Ava's favor. Her stillness was not surrender. It was strategy. Because she knew something they didn't. When you let arrogance speak long enough, it condemns itself. And she was ready to let them bury themselves one insult at a time. The circle thought they were invisible, that the ballroom was theirs, and the mockery, their private sport. But they forgot something. Privilege makes noise, and noise draws eyes. Near the coat room, the young woman who had hesitated earlier finally hit record. Her phone glowed faint in her hand, camera aimed across the glittering crowd. The red light blinked like a quiet alarm. The world was about to see. A waiter, no older than 22, stood frozen with a tray of champagne. His grip trembled as he watched the family sneer and prod. He wasn't supposed to speak. He wasn't supposed to notice. But the look in his eyes said everything he had seen this too many times. At the piano, the musician faltered again, fingers slipping from the keys. A sour note cut through the hall, loud enough to turn heads. Guests whispered, brows furrowed. They didn't yet know what they were watching, but they knew it wasn't just another gala toast. A middle-aged couple near the bar leaned closer. "That's not staff," the husband muttered. His wife nodded slowly. "Look at her. She hasn't moved once. She's not afraid. She's letting them talk." The murmurs swelled like ripples on still water. One voice, then another. "Who is she? Why are they treating her like that? This feels wrong." The woman in emerald, oblivious, continued her performance. "Smile, sweetheart. You'll look prettier for the photos." She gestured at the phones she hadn't noticed yet. Her words landed heavy, ironic because the photos were already being taken, the videos already rolling. The red-dressed matriarch clinked her glass on the edge of a table and laughed. "We should really have someone escort her out. Don't want her ruining the pictures." A gasp fluttered from the corner. The young woman recording couldn't hold it in. She whispered sharply to her friend, "She's not ruining anything. They are." The friend tugged her sleeve nervously. "Delete it. You'll get in trouble." But she didn't. Because once you see injustice, you can't unsee it. The waiter finally moved, lowering his tray, stepping back behind a column. His phone slid from his pocket into his hand. His eyes burned, torn between fear of losing his job and the pull of conscience. He tapped record. Now there were 2 lenses, 2 witnesses. Across the hall, another guest, a man in his 30s with a loosened tie, folded his arms. "This is sick," he muttered, loud enough for nearby tables. Heads turned. Agreement flashed in their eyes. The mockery was no longer background noise. It was spectacle. Ava remained still, silent, watching. But around her, the atmosphere was changing. The cruelty that had seemed so casual now looked desperate under the glow of cameras. For the first time, the family noticed the murmurs. A son glanced over his shoulder, spotting the blinking red lights. His smirk faltered. "They're filming," he whispered to the matriarch. She waved it off, too drunk on her own arrogance. Let them. No one cares what staff think. But they were wrong, because the witnesses did care, and their silence was breaking. The room was no longer entirely theirs. The matriarch's wave of dismissal only fueled the fire. A tall man in a tuxedo, clearly emboldened, raised his voice so it cut through the hall. "Enough of this charade. Who let her in here? This is a private event for real partners, not pretenders." His words cracked like a whip, loud enough for the entire ballroom to hear. Conversations stuttered, heads turned. He wasn't hiding his disdain now. He wanted an audience. The woman in emerald smirked, crossing her arm. "She's not on the guest list. I checked earlier." The lie dripped from her lips with ease, like she'd rehearsed it. Security should have handled this. A son of the family stepped forward, jaw tight, voice sharper than before. "You're standing where you don't belong. Do yourself a favor, leave before we make you." The crowd buzzed. Guests leaned in, some whispering, some gasping. Phones tilted higher. This wasn't subtle anymore. It was open hostility. Ava didn't move. Her silence pressed harder, unsettling those who demanded a reaction. Her lack of fear felt like defiance, and defiance without a single word was more dangerous than any argument. The matriarch lifted her chin, her pearls catching the chandelier light. "Look at her, not even dressed properly. No badge, no escort, no invitation. She doesn't belong here." She turned to the nearest server. "Why are you standing there? Call security. Get her out of my sight." "Ho." The server froze, tray in hand, eyes darting to Ava and back. He swallowed, but didn't move. His hesitation was a statement on its own. The tuxedoed man leaned closer, his voice dropping into venom. "People like you think you can slip into circles you haven't earned, but wealth isn't borrowed. Status isn't stolen. You're embarrassing yourself." The words, "people like you," rippled through the air. A guest near the bar muttered, "Did he really just say that?" Another shook his head. "This is ugly." But the family didn't stop. The woman in emerald tapped her glass against the table, smirking. "She's mute now. Maybe she can't even speak our language." Laughter followed, hollow and brittle. One of the sons shoved a chair aside, blocking Ava's path deliberately. "Go on. Walk through. Let's see how far you get." The mockery had escalated into menace. And still, Ava stood calm, her eyes steady, her posture unshaken. To the family, it looked like weakness. To the witnesses, it looked like composure carved from steel. A whisper broke from the coat-room corner. The young woman with the phone leaned to her friend. "She's not leaving. She's not afraid. Something's coming." And she was right. Because in that moment when the insults had sharpened, when the circle had tightened, when the arrogance had peaked, the family didn't realize they had crossed from cruelty into exposure. Every word, every gesture, every threat was no longer just theirs. The whole room had heard it, and the storm Ava had been waiting for was almost ready to break. The laughter fractured into something darker. The matriarch in red, drunk on attention, stepped forward again. Her glass swirled in her hand, a ruby whirlpool of arrogance. She tipped it, not by accident this time, but with precision. Crimson wine spilled in a thin line across the polished parquet until it stopped at Ava's feet. "Oops," she smirked. "Clumsy me. Someone should clean that up." Gasps scattered through the hall, not loud, but sharp, the kind that ripple when a line has been crossed. Ava didn't flinch. She let the red pool near her heels, her dress untouched, her posture unchanged. The tuxedoed man added fuel. He snapped his fingers at the nearest server, pointing at Ava. "You heard her. Get this woman out. She's wasting everyone's time." The server froze, eyes wide, tray shaking. He didn't move. He couldn't. The woman in emerald leaned close enough for her perfume to sting. "You don't belong here. Do you hear me? This is our world, not yours." Her voice was sharp, dripping with venom, loud enough for the phones now raised in plain sight. The crowd shifted uneasily. A murmur rolled from the bar to the piano. Someone whispered, "This is disgusting." Another hissed, "Why isn't anyone stopping them?" One of the sons, fueled by the crowd's silence, shoved a chair toward Ava, the legs scraping against the floor like a blade across stone. "If you won't leave, maybe we'll make you." Ah. And then came the word that cut deeper than the wine. The matriarch's lips curled, and she spat it like poison. Trash. The air cracked. It wasn't laughter anymore. It was theater turned violent, arrogance turned cruelty. The young woman recording whispered, her voice trembling, "She just called her trash. On camera. Oh my God." The tension thickened, pulling tighter around the room. The family thought they'd cornered Ava. They thought humiliation was complete. They thought silence meant surrender. But Ava's silence wasn't surrender. It was restraint. Because in that moment, when the wine touched the floor, when the insult hit the air, when the threats pressed closest, Ava Thompson was no longer tolerating their performance. She was timing their fall. Her hand slipped into her clutch. One touch, one press, and the line opened. Her voice was calm, surgical, deliberate. "Carla, phase 1, now." The assistant's reply came immediate, crisp, undeniable. "Initiating, ma'am." The family didn't understand. Not yet. They only saw a woman refusing to bow. But the witnesses, the servers, the guests, the phones, understood something else entirely. They were no longer watching a humiliation. They were watching the beginning of a reckoning. The call was short, sharp, surgical. "Carla, phase 1, now." And just like that, the balance began to tilt. Ava slid the phone back into her clutch, her expression unchanged, her silence still intact. But somewhere beyond the marble walls of the Ashford estate, systems stirred awake. Contracts paused. Funds froze. Emails pinged. The machinery of power she had built quiet, invisible, was already moving. The family didn't see it. They only saw a woman who refused to flinch. The tuxedoed man sneered, mistaking her calm for defeat. "Pathetic. She thinks making a phone call will save her. Who's she talking to? Her Uber driver?" Laughter cracked again, but thinner this time, strained. The woman in emerald pressed closer. "You can't bluff here. This is a $1 billion table. You don't even have a chair." But in the corner, the waiter who had started recording glanced at his phone. His eyes widened. He whispered to another server, "Something's happening. Stock alerts. Their company." He cut himself short, fear knotting his throat. The young woman by the coat room captured it all. The insult, the sneer, the phone call. Her voice trembled as she narrated softly for her followers. "She's not reacting, but she's not backing down. I think she's someone important." The matriarch waved her off with a laugh. "Important? Don't make me laugh. She's standing alone. No one here cares who she island." But the murmurs said otherwise. From the bar, from the piano, from the guests, shifting uneasily in their tuxedos and gowns. The witnesses had started to see the crack. Ava remained still, but inside, her thoughts cut clean. They believe power only wears diamonds and drinks champagne. They've forgotten real power doesn't shout. It moves in silence. She glanced briefly toward the server still frozen near the family. His tray trembled, but his eyes held hers for a fraction of a second. It was enough. A silent acknowledgement. He had seen. He understood. The son still blocking her path leaned forward, lowering his voice like a threat. "You'll regret standing here. When security comes, you'll be dragged out." Ava's eyes met his. Calm, steady, absolute. "No," she said finally, her first word since the storm began. One word, clear as glass, slicing through the ballroom. The laughter died. Her voice had weight, not loud, but anchored, impossible to ignore. "No," she repeated. "I won't regret this. You will." The silence that followed was heavier than the chandeliers above. Phones captured every second. Witnesses leaned closer, and the family, for the first time all night, felt something they hadn't expected. Doubt. The doubt spread like a crack in glass, thin at first, then unstoppable. Ava let the silence stretch. Then, with deliberate calm, she stepped forward, past the circle that had tried to cage her. Her heels clicked against the parquet, sharp as gavel strikes. Every sound pulled eyes. Every breath in the room seemed to wait. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You asked who I am." Her tone was even precise, the kind of voice that had closed deals on 4 continents. "Let me answer. Uh, the matriarch scoffed, trying to recover control. Finally, she speaks. Go on then, tell us your fantasy. Ava's gaze didn't flicker. I am Ava Thompson, CEO of Oron Capital, majority stakeholder in your family's company, and the one you've been begging to sign a billion-dollar deal. The words detonated in the ballroom. Phones caught the moment, the hush, the disbelief, the visible collapse of arrogance. The young woman near the coat room gasped into her camera. Oh my God! She's their partner. She owns them. The tuxedoed man's face drained of color. His jaw worked, but no words came. The son who had blocked her path stepped back instinctively, as though the floor beneath him had shifted. The woman in emerald sputtered, You're lying! That's impossible! Ava turned her head slowly, her eyes narrowing with the sharpness of someone used to ending negotiations in a single stroke. Impossible? Check your board minutes. My name is on every line you've ignored. Murmurs surged, a tide breaking through the hall. Guests pulled out their phones, searching, confirming. Screens lit up with articles, Forbes covers, interviews. There she was, Ava Thompson, billionaire, dealmaker, power broker. The matriarch staggered, her laugh brittle now. This is some trick. Ava stepped closer, her presence filling the space like gravity. No trick, just truth. And the truth is simple. You mocked the woman who holds your future, in public, on record, while the world watched. A ripple of applause broke from the back, soft at first, then louder, as witnesses found their courage. The young pianist who had faltered earlier stood, hands trembling but clapping firmly. A man at the bar followed, then another. Soon the sound swelled, filling the ballroom with the weight of shifting power. The family stood frozen, their arrogance dissolving under the spotlight of exposure. Ava let the applause rise, then she spoke again, her voice cutting through the noise. You thought silence meant weakness. It didn't. It meant patience, and patience is over. The line landed like steel. Phones caught it. Guests repeated it, the words already echoing beyond the estate. For the first time, the family wasn't laughing. They weren't mocking. They weren't sneering. They were afraid. The applause kept rolling, uneven at first, then steady, like thunder finding rhythm. The family who had laughed minutes earlier now stood frozen in its echo. The matriarch's face stiffened, her smile twitching as if it could glue authority back in place. It couldn't. Her pearls seemed to weigh heavier with every clap. The tuxedoed man turned pale, tugging at his bow tie as though it were strangling him. He muttered something about a misunderstanding, but the words drowned under the swell of approval for Ava. One of the sons who had blocked her path earlier shuffled backward, knocking into a chair. His bravado drained, replaced by a frantic glance toward the exits. His whisper cracked, She's recording this. Everyone's recording this. And he was right. Phones dotted the ballroom like constellations. Dozens of lenses, red lights blinking, live streams climbing by the second. The young woman near the coat room whispered into her mic, This is history. They mocked her, and now she's exposing them. A man at the bar raised his glass high. To Ava Thompson! His toast split the room. Some guests echoed it immediately, clinking glasses. Others stayed silent, fear locking their jaws. But the tide had shifted. Neutrality was no longer safe. The servers, too, moved differently now. The young waiter who had recorded earlier stepped closer to Ava, placing his tray down with deliberate care. He stood straighter, as if silently declaring where his loyalty lay. Another server nodded, almost imperceptibly, in solidarity. The matriarch hissed, Put your phones away! This is private! Her voice cracked, panic bleeding through the command. No one obeyed. The woman in emerald tried next, her voice brittle. This is being blown out of proportion. She provoked us. But her words fell flat, her tone shrill against the steady rhythm of applause. A guest in a navy suit turned on her. Provoked? She stood silent while you spat on her dignity. We all saw. His words carried weight, heavier than any defense the family could muster. The pianist returned to his bench but didn't play. He set both hands on the keys, resting, watching. His silence was a statement. The performance here was no longer his. Ava hadn't moved since her reveal. She stood calm, composed, her gaze steady. The applause wasn't for a performance, it was for truth, for justice unfolding in real time. And the family knew it. Their empire of arrogance had collapsed in less than 10 minutes. What had begun as mockery had turned into exposure. What had been meant as humiliation had become evidence. They had no allies left in the room, and worse, no control over the narrative. The clapping ebbed into silence, the kind that waits for a verdict. All eyes fixed on Ava. She let the weight hang for one long breath before reaching for her phone again. The gesture was slow, deliberate, more commanding than a shout. She tapped once. The line opened. "Carla," she said, her voice crisp enough to slice through crystal and velvet. "Terminate the Ashford partnership. Effective immediately." Gasps rippled like a shock wave. The tuxedoed man stumbled forward, hands outstretched. Wait, we can discuss." Ava didn't look at him. "Freeze all contracts, pull pending capital, and notify legal. I want a full record logged by midnight." On the other end, Carla's reply was cool, certain, merciless. "Confirmed, ma'am. Termination order logged. All accounts locked." The matriarch's face blanched, color draining as though someone had pulled the foundation from beneath her. You can't do this! We had an agreement!" Ava's gaze cut to her, sharp as broken glass. "We had respect. You shattered it." The woman in emerald tried to interject, voice high-pitched with panic. "This is business! It wasn't personal." Ava stepped closer, her heels echoing like gavel strikes. "Mocking me in public, calling me trash, pouring wine at my feet. Tell me again wasn't personal?" The crowd shifted, murmurs of agreement rising. A man near the piano said flatly, "She's right." Another added, "This isn't business. This is bigotry." Phones tilted higher, capturing every desperate plea, every word Ava spoke. The eldest son, sweating, tried a final bluff. "If you cancel this deal, you'll lose billions." Ava didn't blink. "A billion can be replaced. Integrity cannot." The line landed with the weight of a verdict. Guests murmured, some clapping again, others nodding sharply. The sound wasn't just support, it was judgment. The tuxedoed man tried once more, voice cracking, "Please, Miss Thompson, reconsider." This was a misunderstanding. Ava's reply was ice. "The only misunderstanding here was yours. You thought my silence was weakness. It was restraint." Carla's voice returned through the phone, steady and final. "All ties severed. Public statement prepared, pending your approval." Ava closed her clutch with a snap that echoed louder than any protest. "Release it." The words sealed their fate. The family collapsed, inward shoulders, sagging, eyes darting, hands trembling. The matriarch reached for her glass again, but her grip faltered. For the first time, her pearls looked like chains, and Ava stood taller, not because she raised her voice, but because she didn't need to. Power doesn't beg, power decides. And she had decided. The ballroom was silent, save for the faint hum of phones still recording. The family stood scattered, stunned, their power evaporating like smoke in a draft. Around them, the witnesses no longer looked uncertain, they looked resolute. Ava let the silence breathe. Then she spoke, her voice calm but carrying, every syllable deliberate. "You thought tonight was about a contract. It was never about that. It was about respect. And when you decided I didn't deserve any, you lost more than a deal. You lost your credibility, your dignity, and your mask." Her eyes swept the circle of faces, each one pale under the chandeliers. "I don't need to drag you down. You did that yourselves." The matriarch tried to rally, her voice brittle. This will ruin us." Ava's gaze was steady, unflinching. "Number, you ruined yourselves the moment you mistook cruelty for class." The words hit like a hammer. Phones captured every angle. Already, whispers spread guests, narrating, witnesses live streaming, the story escaping the ballroom faster than the family could contain it. Ava turned, heels striking the floor with precision. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a path. Some clapped softly, others simply watched, reverent. The servers straightened, the pianist bowed his head as she passed. At the doors, she paused, one final glance back. Her voice was low, but it filled every corner. "I wasn't quiet because I was weak. I was quiet because I was watching, and what I saw tonight will be remembered not by me but by the world." The chandeliers seemed to tremble with the weight of her words. Then she left. The applause rose behind her, stronger this time, not for spectacle but for justice. Guests who had stood frozen now stood taller, some wiping their eyes, others shaking their heads in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. The family, once towering in arrogance, now looked small, trapped in a cage of their own making, illuminated by 100 tiny cameras. Outside, the night air was cold, sharp, clean. Ava stepped into it like someone stepping out of a courtroom she had just won. Her phone buzzed once Carla's voice crisp in her ear. "Press release live. It's trending already." Ava's lips curved, not in triumph, but in certainty. Good. Let the truth speak louder than their laughter ever did. And with that, she walked into the night, leaving behind the wreckage of arrogance and the echo of her message. Power doesn't need to shout. It only needs to stand.